Are you looking for some efficient tips for your watercolor painting? Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. My name is Jessica, and today I'm going to be sharing with you how I use multiple brushes and multiple colors alongside each other as I paint this beautiful peony. This piece is actually originally a coloring page from my Etsy shop, but I've created an outline that includes the verse as well as one with just the peony, so that if you want to follow alongside me, you can. This is actually a two-part series where I do the hand lettering in one video and the peony in this video. You can find a link to the lettering video and the outline in the description below. Now, as a side note, I'm releasing both of these videos today because I'm going to be taking a short break next week, and that will give you time to do both parts if you would like to. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, for this particular project, I have actually used a painting as my reference rather than a photo. And so in the Etsy listing that includes the outline, I will also provide you with the full color painting of this peony. So you can use that as your reference. And I'm also going to put that peony in the corner of this video. And so that can be the reference for today's project. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer my peony now onto my watercolor paper. And in my case, I am doing it right beside my verse. So I just want to make sure I've got things lined up the way that I want them. But if you're doing the single peony by itself, you can just go ahead and trace your peony. So just tape things down. It's always helpful so that things don't shift a little bit for you as you transfer. And what I want to pay attention to as I do my tracing is I simplify. I want to keep this more simple and less detailed because we're painting in watercolor. We're not doing colored pencil. And I also want to just do a more simple, laid back style of painting today. So I'm just going to go ahead and trace everything very loosely. So let's pick a complicated area and I'll show you what I mean. So instead of doing maybe as many pieces of this petal here, I'm just going to go like that. Let me zoom in. So you can see how I am simplifying these shapes. I'm not going to do all the little creases and folds. As long as you kind of remember in your mind where those need to land as you paint, you'll be fine. So I'm just going to do a very simple trace here. And again, I'm not even getting every little bump perfect because our paint is going to help define these, and the way we paint are going to define these. So and this area here, I'm just going to put this all as one petal. So basically, just keep the idea of simplicity in mind as you trace, and you don't have to get every single little petal or every single little crease or fold. Again, I'm skipping that little one. I'm skipping this little one. If you happen to like those and you want to get them in there, you can. But I want to just kind of have as few petals here as possible while still getting a beautiful peony. But I don't think every single little petal is necessary for this. And I'm going to keep this fold. I do like that. I think that's helping to define this petal really nicely. And then at the end, if you feel like you want to add any of these, just a few lines here or there, just to kind of let you know what direction to be applying your paint, you can, but I don't really think it's necessary to get them all on there. You can always just refer back to the coloring page as your reference later. Or you can just look at my painting too. And even these leaves, we're going to keep them super simple. I'm not doing the veins. And before you remove all the tape, always take a peek and make sure that everything is the way that you want it to look. Actually, I'm going to come from the other side because I want to look at the peony side. So just peel the tape off. Yeah, I like that. And as usual, I'm going to go around quickly with my kneaded eraser and just remove any smudges here. It's just a normal feature of using graphite paper. You're going to end up with some smudges, and you can just clean those out with the kneadable eraser. And you can also get rid of anything in your lettering as well that's either smudges or even just the pencil marks from your tracing. As I've said before, I really like to keep things as light as possible. I want the pencil to still show up in the camera for you guys, but I also know that as soon as I get water on here, it's going to become permanent. The pencil will become permanent, that is. So definitely work as light as is comfortable for you. And if you ever find your tracing lines are not as bold as you would like them to be, you can just come over with a pencil and just kind of gently darken them a little bit. But like I said, be careful how much I do darken, just because like they won't be able to come off. So Now, as I mentioned before, I'm using Arches cold press watercolor paper. And for my brushes, I'm using my Simply Simons. I have a 6 and a couple 8s here. And for my paints, I'm using my M Graham. I'm using quinacridone rose, cyanine blue, and Hansa yellow deep. I also do have some ultramarine blue in this palette that I may pick up from time to time, but for the most part, I do work with these. But if I'm wanting a purple that's a touch more vibrant, I might grab my ultramarine blue. And so I do have that in my mixture as well. And all the rest of these colors are just kind of leftover mixtures from having mixed my primaries for other projects. And I will show you how I go about kind of recycling and using the paint that I have. But to start with, I'm going to use quinacridone rose and then just drop a little bit of my purple. So if you want to make up a purple either with your phthalo blue or your ultramarine blue, you can go ahead and do that. I've got a lot of purple here from a recent project. And then I also have a mixture. This is mostly Hansa yellow deep, but I've put a tiny little bit of quinacridone rose into that. And because that's kind of what I was using within the lettering, I'm going to go ahead and do the same sort of technique and the same way that I lay things out with this flower. I also have a couple of jars of water as well as paper towel at my side for blotting and rinsing my brushes. The other thing I'm going to do is just put some paper towel over my lettering here because I want to protect it from any splashes or sprays that are going to happen as I'm working. So I'm just going to get that kind of covered for us, and I will bring my palettes over here. And let's go ahead and add our first layers. Now, usually I do start by adding yellows, but today I'm taking a little bit of a change and I'm going to start with adding just light quinacridone rose. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to put a little bit of water into my rose here. Just using my paint pipette, but there's no reason I couldn't have just dripped the water in with my paintbrush as well. I'm just taking a tiny little bit of it. This is very concentrated paint. And I'm going to start creating some slight folds, creases. I'm going to paint in the direction of this petal. And I'm doing something that's a little bit different, and that is I'm not going to be laying down yellows first. I'm actually going to be laying some yellow in as I go. I'm going to be using my base coat as this quinacridone rose, very, very soft and light. And then I'm just going to drop in a bit of yellow, and then I'll drop in a little bit of purple when I feel the need to. And it's going to be done with fewer steps and less layering than I usually am doing. So I'm just going to get some direction of this in here. And I'm actually going to grab another paintbrush so that I keep a separate paintbrush for my yellows. And I'm just going to drop a tiny little bit in here. And as you might have noticed, I'm not actually adding water to every little nook and cranny of my shapes. I'm just getting some basic pink on there, and I'm actually letting some of the white of the paper shine through and help create some of this texture that you can see happening. And while it's still wet, I'm going to come in with a tiny little bit of my purple and just drop it in a few spots. Now this purple happens to be one of the ones I have made with my ultramarine blue. I'm just going to deepen the pinks a little bit kind of at the base of this flower. So that's where I want most of my darks to kind of be, is more within the base. All right, I'm going to leave that petal be now and move on to another one. So again, dropping in my pinks. I accidentally grabbed the wrong brush and got a little bit of yellows in there already, which I wasn't planning on, but that's okay. I'll just add a little bit now, and then I will use water and just kind of let that blend around. I ended up picking up my number 10 as well because it felt like it had a slightly better point on it than one of my little number 8s did. So use whatever round brushes work for you. And now I'm actually coming down and I'm working on a shape that is touching this one. But what I'm doing differently is I'm not quite letting the water meet the shapes. So I'm just going to leave a little white space, a little white gap there, and come in with my pinks. And then back in with a little bit of yellow, just splashes of yellow here and there. I'm actually going to have 4 brushes on the go today. I've got a variety of round brushes. Most of them are synthetic. I have one blend, but I'm going to use 4 brushes so that I can use one for each of my primary colors that I'm going to be using, as well as one for water. Okay, now I'm picking up my purple, and I'm going to just drop a little bit of purple. And again, I want to keep the purple as the same as we did with our lettering. Keep that purple away from my yellow. It can touch the pink, but not the yellow. Just drag, ooh, it's kind of getting a little close to the yellow there, but I'll just leave that be now and move into another shape. And again, I'm leaving some areas with little bits of white, not filling in the entirety of every shape. And I'm going to actually come in with a little bit of water with my pink and just kind of do that over here. Oops. Now that was a lot of pink. I don't mind how that's looking, but I'm kind of thinking that I'm going to just smooth that out, maybe lift a tiny bit to start with. I don't want to go overboard with my pinks too soon. Okay, I'm just going to come in here. My wet brush is needing a clean. And then drop my pink in here. And I'm going to use the pink to kind of form the outline, almost, if you will, of the petal that's in front of it. So I'm just letting that pink kind of create a little bit of texture. I'm going to add a little bit of water to a few shapes here, and then I'm going to just come in and quickly apply my pinks and then my yellow so that I can do a few shapes at once, rather than trying to complete one petal at a time. I want to kind of keep this more fast, more simple. So again, I'm trying to avoid getting water, that is, at the very edge of my petals at the top of each one. So I'm going darker at the base of every petal, or rather the part of the petal that will be the closest to kind of the center of that flower. And then as it fades out, I'm getting less pigment, and I'm also trying to avoid the water at the very edge, so that way I can get petals, I can kind of work on petals that are somewhat touching each other. So just, this is not usually the way I work, but sometimes if I want to work faster and get the details in really quickly without having to wait for everything to dry or work in, you know, one shape and then another, I will just leave a little bit of a white gap. So that's what I'm doing today. And I'm just going to splash bits of yellow into here. And the thing that makes this a little bit different from what I usually do as well is that the fact that I'm putting the pink and the yellow both on at the same time, and they're both wet, is it's kind of making that yellow pink get a little bit orange or coral in some places. So it's actually less separate than usual. It's, rather than having like a yellow underpainting, I have just all the colors mingling in one shot. And then yes, as I said, the purple, I'm just getting little bits of it in, and I'm trying to avoid having it touch where my yellows are. So. Here, this shape is drying a little bit fast, so I'm going to add a little bit of water to blend that around. Okay, let's do this big one, and I'm also, again, trying to avoid getting water everywhere. I'm actually placing this water in a way that I have some little like dry stripes in there, and you'll be able to see how those appear in a quick second when I add my pinks. You can see how things are kind of flowing, and I'm trying to really create some line movement, some pretty line movement in this particular petal, because it's very, very much a flowing kind of petal here. And then I'm going to grab some purple. I might not put too much yellow into this one. And if anything is starting to look a little bit too bright or too bold, I can just grab my water and kind of just gently moisten it, let those colors blend around. You know what, I might go ahead and put a little bit of yellow. I'm gonna put a little bit of yellow down in this section here. And if you're finding that it's a challenge to keep all your brushes separate, like your water and your yellow and your purple, I would just say work with 1 or 2 colors to start with. Just do, you know, do some pinks, do several petals with your pink, and then come in with your yellows, and then finally come in with your purples. And you can even add a layer for your purples at the end. I'm just trying to show you how you can get all your colors in one layer, as long as you keep them, you know, kind of separate from each other. Just leaving those white gaps. Again, I don't know, I'm going to move my paper around so you maybe can see where the water's shining. You can probably tell there's, again, some little white areas or dry areas. I haven't applied the paint. And I'm wetting my sections kind of with that same direction or flow that I plan to put the paint on, so that it's kind of all moving the same way. Even though it's just clear water, I still try and apply it with that same movement that I'm doing here. And then I'm blending it around with a little bit of water, and then I'll be right back with my yellows. And finally a little bit of purple. I want to get a slightly deeper pink here, and I might even throw a little bit more purple on top just to really make that pop. Okay, that purple was not as mixed. It was quite blue there. Just counteract that with a little bit more quinacridone rose, because I grabbed that purple, but that purple was just that part of my palette had a lot of blue in it. So just balance it with a little bit more rose and maybe some water. If you're enjoying today's video and you want to take your artwork to the next level, you'll want to check out these 2 watercolor rose tutorials. When you purchase either of them during the summer months, you'll have access to some live sessions over Zoom with me, where you can receive support, community, and connection on your watercolor journey. You can ask your most burning questions, and if you would like, you can even get feedback on your work. If that sounds like something you would enjoy, you can find links for those in my Etsy shop in the description below. Now let's get back to painting. Let's do this shape here. It's got some interesting movement happening. Again, come in with my pink. Then my yellows. That was really intense, so I'm going to just fade it out with some water. Okay, I've lost my whites there. That's okay. And my shape is kind of going a bit goofy, but I just want to deepen the base of it. Okay, this is really, really bright. I'm thinking that's almost too bright. That shape is just really standing out. I do like some of the movement in it, but I think I'm getting just a little too much pink. So I'm just going to just dab in a couple of spots here. And I might even just drop a teeny little bit of purple just kind of towards the base. I feel like maybe that's mingling a bit with my yellow. It's looking a little bit dirty. Just kind of fix this shape a bit. I went out of the lines, but as you can see, you can fix when you get out of the lines, you can just kind of change up your shape a little bit, stretch it, and it works fine. I'm going to work my way back into these other shapes. And yes, everything is wet, so I'm going to have to be careful that I don't dip my hand in. But I'll just come into here and wet a few of these, and then I'm going to come in with my pink. And as I've said before, I'm not being super tight with my water. Again, always deepest color at the base, and things are a little dry, so I'm going to have to grab some water to blend them out. So I'm going to do that right away. Actually, I don't think I even wet that shape. I think I'm working in one of my dry shapes. Gotta get some water on there pretty quick. I do like the bits of white that are still shining through in here. I like that on here. This one, definitely, I think I had missed getting water on there. I think I wet the one above it. And so it's got that look of having been a little bit dry when I apply the paint, but it's okay. I'm going to get it fixed here. And a little bit of pink into this one. And then some yellow. And if things are ever feeling too dry, just remember, you can throw a little drop of water in. Okay, I'm going to move myself into this shape here and throw a tiny bit of our pink next. I know I still have to come back and drop a little purple into those shapes, so I'll do that in a quick second here. I'm going to put the purple again. I'm keeping away from the yellow. Sometimes I'm using that purple closer to the base. And I'm just going to go around and carry on dropping water into each dry shape, and then the pink, and then the yellow, and then the purple. Feeling like I've got a lot of yellows in here, so I'm probably going to try and back down a little bit. Just try and get a little bit more of my purple, and just throw a little bit of water where I'm feeling that the yellow is getting a bit bold. I might even dab that out a bit because it's feeling very bold, and I'm kind of thinking I'd like to get my shape to be just a little bit less intense because it's kind of at the top, and I want it to kind of harmonize a bit with this one beside it. Now I'm noticing one shape here has got a little bit of paint where I didn't intend to put it, so I'll just quickly lift it a little bit. It's not a big deal. I don't mind it being a little bit of a light pink. I just wanted to keep this area where it's folded over. I want to have it as a lighter section. I'll be darker in here, but I think lighter here. So just dab that a bit, and then I will go ahead and get some water on here. I'll just wet this. This is kind of like one petal folded over. It's kind of a fold that kind of almost folds over twice, if you will. Kind of folded here and folded there. And I didn't keep the direction particularly straight here, so we'll see what happens when I add a little bit of this pink. Don't want too much of it. I want to really be soft with this fold. Usually my folds are darker, but in this case I'm going to have softer folds. And just put a teeny little bit of pink. I'm just going to grab the same brush. I can just wash my brush. Might be the easier way to go about it. Still getting pretty dark there. Oh well. Just put the tiniest little hint of purple in here. Stroke it in the direction of how I want these folds to actually be. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing here because this is kind of, again, another fold. And then I will bring the pink in. Ooh, that's very bold. Just rinse that out a bit. And then mostly I'm going to be using purple over here just to kind of create this folded over soft petal. Just use some extra water. And that's good enough. I might come in here afterwards and deepen some on this side, but we'll see. I'm gonna just leave that the way it is for now. And I do want to come in here and deepen this. Might give it just a quick second to dry, and I will work over here. Some of these petals have dried. I took a little pause here. Throwing a bit of yellow in here and just blend that out. And then maybe I'll get a bit of purple kind of going in the deepest section here. I'm really kind of just, again, thinking darker when I'm in the deeper areas. It doesn't always mean I'm choosing purple for the darkest. Sometimes I just use a very soft light purple, but in this case I'm gonna go with some purple and some pink down here to kind of push it back a little bit. And kind of push it in as well, because it's kind of getting less light because it's closer to the base of the peony. Put a little water here, just kind of filling in the rest of the area, and with just tiny little bits of petal wherever I feel like I need to finish up some petals. I've got a lot of white gaps, but if the white gap is actually a petal, I'll fill it in. I'm just going to create a little bit of movement there. Kind of broke that petal up a bit, but put a little bit of purple in there, just a tiny bit. And some more pink. And then I'll come in after with a little bit more of my pink and my purple, just to kind of push things a little bit in the center of this flower, because right now everything's a little bit flat. There's not quite enough depth. I really like how soft that petal is there, but it's really almost too soft for the rest of this painting. So I'm just going to come in and just push it a little bit further into the pinks. I'll just go a bit deeper and darker kind of at the base. Things are kind of bleeding there. Obviously this petal beside it was too wet for how wet I just did that. Just use a damp, thirsty brush and just kind of lift it and move it around a bit. I'm going to put a little bit down here. Again, I don't mind leaving some white gaps, but if the white gap is quite large, then I'll fill it in. And then I will do this shape. Hopefully it will be dry enough. Again, starting with my pink and kind of defining the petals that are above it. This is going to be darkest. Again, the base is closest to here, so it's going to be darkest here, and then it will fade out. But it will be just dark here because I've got this petal kind of curling in front of it. And yes, this might still be a bit damp, so we'll see how it goes. Yeah, it's working okay. I'm going to push it with a little bit of purples. And then throw more pink in here. Probably I won't get too much for the yellow. We'll see. Ooh, that's very intense pink. I think I'm going to just gently dab that a bit. I feel like I kind of went a little bit overboard and it's sticking out just a little bit too intensely. I want enough pink and just enough dark value to kind of push this shape behind this one, but I don't want it to be really like standing out too boldly. So that might be okay. I'm going to go ahead and let that dry for a minute and work on the leaves, and then I'll come back in and define the details. So for a green, I do have some kind of green mixtures on the go here. And I actually am going to do something a little uncharacteristic for me, and that is to make it a little bit more vibrant because we are working with incredibly vibrant colors. So I'm just going to go ahead and add more yellow to this green, and I think that this might be a good green. And then I might go ahead and mix up a darker green, but again, it's going to be a little more intense. I'll just do that here. I'll start with the green I have, add more yellow, and then I might even use phthalo blue so that I have a nice intense green, which is different, but this is just a very intense, bright piece. Now, this is not like 100% phthalo blue because I do have this yellow here is a bit dirty. Then I will grab my blue. You know what? I'll grab a tiny bit of this phthalo blue out of this palette here. Might already be too much. Let's see what we get. I can add a little bit more. Now, like I say, it's not just yellow and phthalo blue together because my yellow was kind of dirty. And as you can tell, my blue is a little bit dirty too. So it's very, very slightly neutralized, but I'm okay with that. This is still pretty intense, and I think it's kind of pretty. I think it'll go nicely with these particular colors that we've got going here. And then I might drop in a few other colors as well. So I'm going to go in with my number 8 and start defining some of these leaves. I'm going to just put a tiny little bit of this green on my brush, so it's mostly water, and then I'm going to come in here and do some varying pressure techniques. So I'm going to come in with just the very tip of my brush and then press down so that I get some depth. A little more green on my brush and try and define this leaf here. I've gone out of the line from what this leaf was like, but and just close that gap in a little. I do like that light gap there. And then I'll do the same thing here. This one's a little harder though because I don't have the tip of the leaf to work with, so it's going to be cut off. And this is where you can decide if you want to have your greens mingle at all with your pinks. You can actually wet that shape and let the greens in. I'm not 100% sure if I want to do that. Let's see how it looks. Let's try this. Just going to wet this petal and let that green kind of mingle in and see if I like the look. So I'll just come up to it like so, just see. Yeah, I don't mind that a little bit, actually. That's kind of pretty. I'm going to grab a little bit of ultramarine blue and just dip a little bit into the base of this one here because I feel like this leaf could be darker. And so I'll just put a little bit of the ultramarine blue at the base of it. And then back to my light green, and I'm going to do the same technique, but I'm going to be really careful that I don't get too close to that one because the colors will the two leaves rather will bleed into each other. So just do this and let them, they can touch down here, of course. And maybe I should let those leaves blend together. Do I want them to blend together? I don't know. I'll keep them apart for now. This is also where you can decide if you want a little bit of pink mingling with the colors that are in your leaves. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to grab my brush for my pink and I'll just drop it in a few spots, like here. Maybe a little bit of water to encourage it to move around, and you'll be able to see there's pink now in our leaf. That kind of creates a little bit of harmony between the flower and the leaves. Kind of like that. I'm going to do that again, maybe a little bit here. And again, I'll use water to encourage it to just move around a tiny bit. Okay, I'm going to move away from those and maybe do, oh, I see. This is still wet. Kind of cut into this leaf here. I've got my shapes so light I can barely see what they're doing. I wanted them to be super light, so I had artistic license to create my shapes a little bit, but I was so light I didn't even see I was painting on a leaf. I thought I was just on a stem or something. I know I'm touching that leaf, that's okay. This one can be in front. And I'll be able to deal with the transition there in a minute. I've got my kind of medium, I got a mixture of the greens on my brush right now, but that's okay. Going back into my light green and just pull this down. I don't have much rhyme or reason for when I'm picking up the light or the dark. I typically work from light to dark, but I am just kind of experimenting with my colors here, because as you know, this is a little bit different from how I usually paint. Throw a nice splash of pink in there. And again, you have to be really careful when you do that kind of thing, like throwing a splash of pink, that you don't overwork your colors after that. Just kind of drop it in there, and if you need to help encourage it a little bit to move, you can, but don't go overboard. I'm going to grab a little bit of my ultramarine blue again to kind of get a darker color going as well. I actually like how that kind of cut off like that. I'm going to just leave it. Now this, I might have waited a bit long to get those dark colors there because I'm kind of getting a bloom, so I'm going to just quickly clean that up with a damp brush. And I can come in here later and just get things to balance out a little bit. Got my medium green again, and I'm going to just make this leaf attach to the other leaves. Peonies kind of do attach like that, don't they? And again, I'm leaving a little bit of white space, and then I'm dropping some of my ultramarine blue and letting it kind of mingle. And let's do this one last leaf here. I'm going to start with dark on that side, then I'm going to come in with a lighter green on the other side. And I'm actually going to let it bleed. I'm going to end up letting it bleed into my petal in front. So I'm just going to do this, and then I'm going to wet that one and let it brush in. I've kind of lost my white spaces there, but I'm going to move quickly here and get this petal wet so that this can kind of bleed into here. Just wetting the one petal, and as you can see, then the colors are kind of mingling, and it looks like, you know, it almost looks like we painted them both at the same time. But I'm just going to add a tiny, tiny drop of pink there, maybe a tiny drop of blue. Do I like that? I think more water. I think I was actually liking it before I added that drop, maybe. Yeah, I think I liked it light better. That's okay though with the blue. Could have let, you know, if you like that look, you could. But I gotta move away from here because I'm kind of getting a little bit of a mess now with my whites, or my lights, kind of mingling into this color. I'm just gonna add a little bit more of that vibrant green back on there and leave it alone before I make a bigger mess. Okay, just fix my blue up here. Okay, let's leave that be. We can decide if we like that look or not. I'm thinking I might want to eventually put a little bit of pink into this leaf here, but while that's drying, I can come up and do these two leaves here. Which, do I want those to mingle into there? I could, or I could not. I'm going to grab some of my, again, you can see I'm taking artistic license and I'm changing the shape of these leaves from what I had originally done them as on the coloring page. I almost feel like I could have another leaf coming up here too. I think I might do that. Just work really thin, and then I'll come in with some of this blue. Again, this is just some of my ultramarine blue, and it's just kind of darkening the stems a little bit and the areas where things are connecting. And I'm going to have to later on kind of connect it down here too, but that's okay. I think I kind of like that. I do think it would look pretty if I add a little bit of pink to some of these though, because they're looking a little bit lonely and disconnected. So I'm just going to add some water first and then come in with my pink brush and just drop a little bit of pink in, a little bit more water, and let that mingle. Sorry, but I watch my position here. I don't know, maybe a little bit of pink somewhere else on here. And again, I always like hitting that water just to encourage it to mingle, unless things are wet enough. Sometimes they do mingle really nicely on their own, but other times not. I'm just going to create some stems here. Darker because I'm going to push it behind. I want to push this stem behind the thing in the petal in front. Just going to go in with a little bit of this green and probably a little bit of my ultramarine blue. Just move things around here. Okay, so I'm just going to throw a little bit more ultramarine blue in there to kind of darken. I want to push this particular branch, right? Or yeah, stem, maybe is a better word, behind this leaf, and it is kind of, yeah, it's just a bit wet, so it's just behaving a bit odd right now, but that's okay. I can come and fix that after. I'm just gonna get this one in, go a bit bolder, and join them. That's maybe okay. And then this one, I'm going to take a little bit of artistic license and try and knock it back a little bit behind the one above it. I'm using my medium green again. Again, I'm using very bright, bold colors here. And work myself around that little, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to keep it pushed back, I think. And just drop a little bit of the ultramarine blue in again to kind of help push it backwards. That was definitely a lot more blue than I want, so I'm just going to drop a little bit more green on top of that. And I'm not sure if I actually want any pink in this section down here or not. I think it can probably be fine just as it's kind of just a more bold dark green. Just going to come in here and just tweak this a little bit, let it flow around, and I can always push that. Because I was kind of working with things being a little bit wet here, it kind of blended, but I'll just let it blend and then I'll push it back after. I'm also noticing I've got a little splash here. Sometime I obviously got some water where I didn't want it, so I'll just go ahead and scrub at it for a minute with my cleaning brush. It's kind of stuck on there, but maybe what we will do is do some splatters after. I feel like I've got a bit of green maybe in here, but I'm feeling like this may be a painting that would lend itself well to doing some splatters anyways, so let's see. Just try and soak this up, and whatever doesn't come up we can just do. I think I gotta go clean my paint water or my brush because I'm getting a little bit of a weird color going on here. So this is dry, and I'm going to go in with my kneadable eraser and just get rid of any pencil lines that I can to help me decide then from there where I want to go in with any final details. So this is going to just get rid of the outside pencil lines, and thankfully some of these areas I obviously didn't get them wet or wet enough that I have completely made them permanent. So that's kind of nice because I'll be able to just, in a few areas, keep things softer. And then I can decide if I want to define it with paint or just let them just kind of fade into the background a bit. Okay, so for my final touches, I want to just add a tiny little bit of kind of a deep red, maybe a bit of red and purple together, just to define anything that feels like it's just maybe a bit lost. The center isn't as dramatic as I would like it to be. So I'll just cover my lettering again. I'm going to keep things a little bit more simple this time and just have one brush for my paint, one for my water, and I'll kind of just go back and forth between my pink and my purple with my paintbrush, and then I'll have my water brush just clear and just throw in a few details where I just want to push things just that little bit more. You know what I'm wanting to push is just kind of the depth, kind of the darkest darks. So maybe rather than even using two colors, I'll just mix a little bit more of my quinacridone rose into my bluey purple that I have here, so that we're just a little bit of a deep, deep kind of purpley red color, and I'll just drop that in a few spots. So I went ahead, got some water, and I'm gonna be careful that I'm not too concentrated. I'll just dab things off on my paper towel, because sometimes I come in here a little bold. That is quite bold. So let's just gently blend that around. Almost could be a little bit more vibrant, couldn't I? But it is blending around not bad. I'll just have to be really careful with this color that I don't air too much into the purple side. I do want to have a pink look, and I want it to harmonize still with my verse. So I definitely need to make sure that I don't get any more purple than this. This is kind of the most purple I want to get with this layer, but all I'm wanting to do is just kind of create a little bit more definition in the areas that just feel like they're just not quite defined enough. So I'm just going around quick and adding water, then a little bit of this deep color, and that's all that I'm using is just these two colors together, and drying my brush as often as I need to keep things from being too sopping wet, because I want to just have a little bit more control. And then I'm also just trying to make sure that if my shapes are touching, that, you know, maybe there's a little white gap, or that the shapes are going to touch in an area that is okay for them to be touching, if that makes sense. Kind of at the base. If the bases are kind of touching each other, I think I'm okay with that. So I better not dab on this paper towel that I'm supposed to be protecting my scripture verse with, right? That would not be smart. Protect it and then dab your brush on there. Just use this one. Again, I'm always just trying to get the base of these petals to be where the depth and the darkest sections are. Again, water, and then a little bit of this color. And you can see that shape, I didn't do much to it. I just kind of got the water on there and a couple like almost like stripes. They were striping downwards towards the base, and then I did a couple of those little lines and then just let them bleed out. Just doing that in a few spots. I do like that kind of more towards this center here. I think it helps define it. Oops. And if you work fast enough and you decide you want to put a little bit of paint before your water, you can. You just have to be really careful that you don't end up with a hard edge. And by hard edge, I just mean, you know, that your paint is kind of like, right now, it's a hard edge. But once I get the water on, and if I'm doing that fast enough, it'll just blend gently blend into the rest of the petal. Okay, this was a little bit of a leap here, but I think I'm going to be happy with it. Yes, I think that dark red is kind of bringing things a bit to life. I'm happy with that. Creating a little bit of definition there. Take kind of a curled, a bit more of a C shape here so that I can kind of give the impression that this is a little bit less angular. And remember, you can kind of you can carve the shape of the petal above by how you come in with your darks below it. I'm just going to kind of stretch this petal out a little bit because it's, I don't know, the shape is kind of striking me a bit odd. I'd even do that in a few spots where I feel like I've kind of either not come out as far as I could have, or just to kind of create a little bit of, I don't know, a round look. I'm almost wondering if I should just invent a few little petals here. I don't know. Should I? This is a little bit risky. Maybe I'll just put a little bit of something back here and then define it right along this base, the bottom edge. And just blend that around a little bit. Can just kind of fade into the background a bit. That's not really fading anymore, is it? But I kind of think that's pretty. Just leave it be like that. Yeah, I think I might be okay. I just felt like there was almost maybe too much of a gap. Hopefully I'll be okay with that look. Just going to dab it just a little bit where these two petals are meeting here. We might go ahead and put a little bit of splattering after. I don't know. What do you guys think? As you can see, I've got so much paint on my brush. I've hardly like ever even dipped back into that paint. What's on this brush is going a long way. Part of it is because I'm not wanting a lot of really strong color on here. Part of it's just that this paint's so concentrated on my brush right now, and part of it's that I'm just trying to do little smidgens at a time, right? Okay, I'm just going dry, directly kind of wet on dry there, because those shapes are pretty much dry, but I don't mind getting pretty deep and dark towards the center of this flower right here, because it's just, that's where I want the most darkness. I might kind of take one of these petals and split it in half. I know I joined some of them at the beginning when I was tracing, but I'm thinking, you know what, this is looking like too big a petal. So I'm just going to split it by pushing half of it back. So this section here is kind of getting pushed a little bit back. Again, I went directly on there with my dry paint, but I think that I'm getting away with it right there. Split that shape again right there. I just felt like something was, yeah, I think I like that better. It's a little bit more broken up. Put a little bit of darkness along here too. Push this one to the back a little bit. And this is all kind of wet right now, so once it dries, I might be able to define that just a smidgen more. What do you think? Should we go ahead and add a few splatters on here? I'm wondering about putting a little bit of splattering kind of along this lower area here with the green. I don't know how many splatters I really want on the flower. I'm noticing some of my petals along the top here are a little bit flat, so I'm just going to try and come in and just kind of create a little bit of kind of a ruffled look to them, just so they have a little bit more detail. Again, using my same pink and water. Okay, this is getting a little bit purple. Just going to throw a little more of my quinacridone rose in there and try and come back in here. Like I say, it was getting a little bit on the purple side there. Just kind of going alternating back and forth between my pink and this kind of reddish pink color and the water, just so that I can kind of deepen some of these shapes and hopefully carve a little bit of that top ruffle onto some of these little petals here. So I'm carving the ruffle on the petal that's in front by getting dark on the petal that's behind. Just dab a little bit. I really don't want to have overpowering pink. I really just want to create a little bit of shapes along the edge. So I'm really kind of digging into that petal, the front petal, with the dark pink so that I get a little bit of a jagged edge on the edge of the petal. Might even put a little something here just because this one back petal is quite dark, getting quite light, sorry, compared to the other ones. I think I like that better. I'm really happy with the edge of how that turned out. It's not quite as flat anymore. I'm gonna try and do a little bit of bumpiness here. And again, blending it into the petal behind it. I think I'm much happier with that. I'm gonna just maybe put a little bit of something here to kind of harmonize this petal with everything else. Do a little bit of pink back here, just again, really just trying to carve out any of the petals that are in front by darkening the petal that's behind. The one last thing I want to do with this leaf here is to put some water on it, and then I'm going to drop a tiny little bit of pink and let it bleed down so that this petal here and this leaf here kind of merge into each other a little more. You can see we already had the green kind of flow up into there. I want to do the opposite now and have the pink flow back into the green. So I'm just going to drop a little bit of pink kind of along this edge, and then we'll let it blend around with a little bit of water. And again, if you don't like that effect, you'd rather just have that hard edge where the green and the pink meet, you can definitely leave them that way. I just felt like it was almost, I don't know, I felt like I wanted a little bit of just a smooth transition between them. You can see I kind of went a little bit out of the lines there. I can kind of clean that up maybe with a paintbrush when it's dry. Let's just dab it and see. It's kind of scary to try and clean it up right now because it's, if I put more water there, I'll just encourage the paint to come out if I'm not careful. So sometimes I just, when those kinds of things happen, I wait and clean them up after the shape here dries. But I think it's working okay for now. I just have to keep an eye on that as it's drying, that it doesn't bleed out. Otherwise, I think I'm happy with that. If you've enjoyed painting along with me today, you'll want to check out my watercolor playlist where you can find more videos like this one. In the meantime, I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye!